And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Best Phone Plans Podcast. Today, Dennis and I are joined by special guest Austin Lutz. Austin works for Cloverhound, and he's got a wide range of knowledge when it comes to voice technology. So, in this episode, we're talking about voice over LTE, voice over NR, which stands for new radio, or is basically voice over 5G. I think it's going to be a really great and exciting episode. So, Austin, I want to welcome you to the show. He's over here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thanks, Stetson. I'm doing good. Hope you guys are as well.
Yeah. So where do you want to start when it comes to like voice technology, like how it originated? I feel like there's been so many evolutions with 2G, 3G, LTE, and now 5G. Where do you think is a good jumping off point when it comes to voice?
I think, for this discussion, I think we could probably start around 3G. We can start talking about some of the ways that voice evolved starting from 3G going all the way up to the current standard of 5G, right? So when we think about voice in the cellular space, that's really the most important thing about our cell phones. And I guess that's starting to change for a lot of people. But historically, what people want is to have a nice crystal clear audio call, nice wideband, reliable, consistent. And there's a group called the 3GPP. They develop standards for all of cellular technology, and they developed the original 3G voice standard. I'm not exactly sure what year that was, but it was quite some time ago when 3G came out. I know that voice over LTE was coined early in 2012 by coincidentally Metro PCS.
No way.
Yeah, that was prior to the acquisition by T-Mobile, before they were obviously rebranded to Metro by T-Mobile. But yeah, so just going from 3G to 4G was really the biggest evolution in the way that we route voice calls. Voice over LTE opened up an immense amount of bandwidth using the IVAS codec, which allowed for, the acronym is SWV, but it's literally called super wideband.
Okay.
Very technical
Yeah.
term that they decided to use. So
Do you know like
Yeah.
what the bandwidth went to? Like for 3G, it could
Yeah.
be like some kilobit per second, and with LTE, suddenly it like opened
Yeah.
up to what?
Yeah, so it went up to when it went to voice over LTE, it went up to 64 kilobits per second. And for those that are watching that would think of that in like home phones or like office phones at people's desks, there's a codec called G711. And that's probably the closest comparison that I can make to what super wideband would be. We will see a lot of G711 codecs with our carriers that we work with, where I work. Typically, you'd walk into like a bank, right? And they all have phones on their desks, and they connect to some magical network that routes these phone calls to and from cell phones. So when we go in and we set up the phone system or the contact center or any method to communicate with people in the outside world, we're having to figure out what codec to decide on. And again, we would choose G711 because that's not a cellular technology. But in voice over LTE land, we're going to be choosing the super wideband codec because it's obviously gives you the best possible experience for the end users. But voice over LTE up until recently, like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you know, AT&T really kind of grinds my gears a lot of times when it comes to voice over LTE compatibility. And I think others would also feel the same way because they have stringent guidelines on what devices they want to even allow or support on their network. So if your phone is not a specific model and has an IMEI in this range or whatever, they're going to say, nope, we're not going to support voice over LTE. You're going to be stuck back in 3G land, or AT&T calls it HSPA plus. That is just fancy 3G. That's not actually 4G. So
is there a particular reason why AT&T is so stringent? Like, are they doing a different, like, do they have like some type of customized codec that's a little bit different from what T-Mobile's doing, or?
yeah, that's a good question, Dennis. I mean, in my testing, I've done extensive like packet captures from phones, like from iPhones and from Android phones. You can you could pull the actual network traffic across the wire. In our case, across the air, you can pull that off into a file. You can extrapolate that and look at the actual data that passes through it. I can't tell AT&T doing anything different from Verizon. The only people that I've ever seen, or the only company that I've ever seen do anything different, is Sprint. Sprint used to do some really weird stuff with their voice traffic, where they would route it across VPNs. And I don't know, well, obviously they're not doing that anymore because Sprint is gone and T-Mobile has acquired them. But Sprint's network, their voice network, was really intriguing because I found it to be really stable back in the day, even when AT&T Verizon were not quite there to the voice over LTE standard. Sprint, as you probably know, was acquired a while back by T-Mobile. But in my world and what I'm used to seeing, I'm not used to knowing Sprint for their cellular capabilities. Sprint actually has an immense backbone across the United States, like in terms of fiber. So they are responsible for a ton of fiber that runs from the east to the west coast. And, in addition to all the spectrum that T-Mobile got when they purchased Sprint, they also picked up all those circuits in that nationwide fiber network. And I think that is kind of like one of the things that we're all kind of forgetting here, is that T-Mobile was really struggling with their backhaul, and picking up Sprint not only helped them with their 2.5 gigahertz N41 spectrum. Well, at the time it was the LTE band 41, but they've also tapped into the expansive fiber network across the country. So I think we're going to see a lot more. We're going to see a lot more growth in what the capabilities are, because the highways have been opened up. And I think it's just going to be such a great experience moving forward for all of these customers. And now that we've got the stir and shaken method implemented, I don't know if you guys have seen that or have heard about what that is.
Are you talking about with scam call, the stir and shake for FCC guidelines for rooting out scam calls?
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the cool things about that is that you can actually validate what's called the caller ante. That caller ante is the number that's presented to the far end. So if I call you, Dennis, before the stir and shaken method, I could just make up some fake number and send to you. Like I could pretend to be Stetson and send you a call, and I could send you Stetson's number. And then when you miss the call and you call it back, you could actually call Stetson. So the stir and shaken method has provided an additional layer of security for not only landline calls, but also voice calls. And it's really cool.
That is really cool. It sounds like it's helping to validate the number that you see calling you is the person that is in fact calling you, and when you pick up, you can answer with a little bit more confidence.
Yeah, and that's what you'll see on there, Stetson. I don't know how they do it on Android, since I currently don't have an Android phone, but you'll see the check mark next to the number in your call history if you look at that. I don't know if Mint has implemented that, or if other MVNOs are doing that.
Is that a network thing? Is that a carrier thing? Like, were the carriers working together to develop this, or do you know the backstory of what was going on there?
That's an FCC.
I'm not sure. Go ahead, Dennis.
So that's an FCC mandate based off the increase in scam calls, and that technology is implemented at the carrier level. Or let me rephrase that. That's being implemented by the three major networks, so T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. Mm-hmm. For MVNOs, I would imagine there's probably just some type of SOC or provisioning of firmware that is just necessary to take advantage of it, because it's actually happening at the core level.
Have you seen any in your testing? I know you have an iPhone, Dennis. Have you seen that on yours at all?
So I actually don't. My iPhone's behind me. My 12 Pro Max. I actually don't use it that often. I actually use my Galaxy S20 the most.
Okay.
And I do know you're talking about the green checkbox. It's usually verified by Scam Shield.
Yeah.
Google Pixels actually have their own software with you can call, like if I call my dad's Google Pixel 3a, I have it set up so that it gets like a little transcribe, like the person has to actually talk, so you answer the call. So that's
I think that's called Google Duplex, where it'll like answer for you, call screening.
Yeah, which I actually think is an even more effective way of doing things than the stir and shaken method, because ultimately all automated systems are going to have flaws. There's nothing better than you, the person, being able to read and see this is like an actual person talking and not Jessica talking about your car warranty.
Not
but-
Jessica again.
How many car warranty calls do you guys get every week?
Oh man.
My main T-Mobile number has been like pretty tamed down over the years. But one of my new numbers that I got for the free line probably gets about 50 scam calls
A week?
Like,
Sheesh.
no, I was gonna say like a day.
Oh wow,
Oh
that's
my
nuts.
God.
Yeah, I don't. I definitely don't get that many. I use the T-Mobile Scam Shield on my personal line, and it seems to block like 95%. I get maybe one, maybe two every couple of days, but definitely a lot less than when I didn't have it.
Yeah,
I don't
I've been
think-
I've been getting hit really hard with a student services asking about my outstanding federal student loan balance.
Oh yeah,
It's
Yeah,
been
I
going
like
to
those.
my Google Voice number, and that's just forwarding to my phone. And I don't think like I need to just turn that off because it's getting really repetitive.
hmm
Yeah, that's why I
That's
turned
fair.
off one of the digit numbers. But but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't actually think Scam Shield works that well, to be perfectly honest. I just don't.
Interesting.
I mean, even once you notify a number that it's like a bad number, and it'll just get a voicemail, another number is just gonna come up in its place. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna like take it. I feel like. Sorry.
I was
I
just
was-
gonna say, I think that's gonna change, Dennis. Right now, the Stern Shaken method implementation is still, I feel like, in its infancy. All the carriers have come out to their newsroom and said, "Oh, look, we've implemented this feature and it's already out there." But I think in order for that to be effective across the board, other carriers are going to have to implement that because, you're not getting spam calls from T-Mobile or Verizon or AT&T. Dennis, you're getting spam calls from these shady PSTN carriers that have interconnects with exchanges and that are able to dial into, like the actual PSTN. And
Right.
what I mean by PSTN is the publicly switched telephony network. And that's just the network in the United States that follows the North America number plan. So that's just a fancy way of saying any 10-digit number, right? In the United States, we dial 10-digit numbers. If you want to dial outside of the United States, you have to enter in the country code and then whatever the digit length is for that country. Probably, for a lot of people, they don't know that the United States' country code is +1, but you've probably seen that on some documentation, whether it be at the bank or whether you go to the mall or, you go to the restaurant, you'll see that +1, 10 digits. That's just a moniker to denote that that's a United States phone number.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say I feel like for Stern Shaken to work, if I understand it correctly, basically everybody has to do it, and you have to have a huge database that basically says, and that's inherently a flawed way to do things because databases will always be incomplete or always be lacking in updated information.
Yep.
I feel like if we wanted to actually fix this problem and the most coherent way possible, it'd basically doing the Google Duplex way of doing things.
Yeah, and I think that kind of folds into what I was going to talk about next is, there's a database they've already implemented a database called the Icann Database, which is how when Dennis, you place a call to Stetson and Stetson doesn't have your phone number, it shows up as Dennis P.
Yeah.
It will actually pull that information that you provide and your carrier provides to whoever routes the call and sends that information onward to Stetson. And that's all, it's not magic, right? Someone has to know who your name is. And the carrier that you signed up with for your cell phone plan will know that information about you.
I'm curious.
So I think, do it.
I was gonna say I'm curious for Stetson. Stetson, when I first text you, man, did it show up with my full name? I don't think it does.
No,
it?
no, it doesn't show up with anything. Like for a text message, I have to add you into my contacts. For a call, I've pretty much only seen the number unless I've had the person in my contact. But it sounds like you can configure it that it'll display a number or a name.
You can, and the only carriers that I've seen it work with are Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, like straight
Okay.
carriers, like mobile network operators. I've never seen Mvnos have a mechanism to do that because they themselves would have to take that information and update it with the carrier. So I don't know how they would do that. But
Yeah.
I know for me personally, like Like my cell phone plan it's signed up in my wife's name. So when we first got our plan years ago, I would call people and it would show up as my wife's name, and people would be like, "You're not this person."
Yeah, yeah.
So I contacted T-Mobile, and they promptly changed it, and now they have a way to do it online, so you can go online and change it to whatever you want. It just has to be a legitimate name and not anything crazy. Like you can't put Batman or whatever. It has to be a name on the account. That actually is a real user.
Well, I think T-Mobile, if I'm like T-Mobile lets you actually fill in what you want to show up as a caller ID. So I think that's whatever is going to display, right? So I could put Batman in there.
Yeah, but the thing is like it's not immediate though, Dennis. I mean, I'm sure we could try it and see, but I know when you save that information, it goes, it could take up to 72 hours to propagate because, like we talked about earlier, it's a database, and that database just gets propagated out to other carriers and says, hey, look, every day we're going to send you a Delta file, right? And whatever the difference is, you just need to update your database with our database. And sometimes when we do our testing for calls, Stetson, I was talking to you about this earlier, but when we do testings for cutovers or any network changes that we do either at work or that I do in my spare time when I'm tinkering around, we find that propagation not only across regions but also across the US and with different carriers is very different. So like for example, we could move some phone numbers from one building to another, and we could test that phone call to make sure it worked. It would work on AT&T, but it could take 8 to 10 hours to work on T-Mobile. So,
Wow.
These networks are not magic, and it's not instantaneous across the board. Each carrier has their own exchange where they route phone numbers from one regional site to the other. And I think it's just important that people understand that, when we think of T-Mobile, we think of this behemoth, or when we think of AT&T and Verizon, we think of these just massive data centers ingesting all these different calls and data, and they do, but there's still a local presence within each region that governs a lot of those things that we know and use every day.
That's really, really cool to think about. Do you know, jumping back a little bit to the voice technology and what is being used there, are the carriers using the same tech, or are they using different codecs and different implementations to transcode and transmit their voice data?
Yeah, so back early on, when 5G NR was going through 3GPP to actually become a standard, the standard wasn't actually called NR at the time. It was called TF, and that was Technology Forum, and that was proposed proposed and developed by Verizon and a number of other global partners. That standard eventually, pushed the industry forward for 5G, but never actually made its way into the 3GPP standard. 5G NR was then introduced, and then NR ended up becoming what we know now as 5G. These names are really intriguing because, back in 2012 when the first LTE network was introduced, they came up with the name long-term evolution.
Yeah, I remember
And
that.
then now we're talking about like new radio. The names I just find comical because what do these things have to do with any of the technology that goes along with them?
Well,
You would think that they would be more like what the Wi-Fi Alliance has done, where they've rebranded 802.11 in and AC and AX to be Wi-Fi 5 and 6 respectively. Those are easy for consumers to understand. Consumers do not understand, yes, I've got 5G new radio or long-term evolution. That just sounds like nonsense.
Right.
Well, LTE
yeah.
was technically supposed to be the last thing. Like if you LTE was a very long generation with lots of things that got added throughout the way.
Yeah.
There was even a point where we got LTE or advanced. All these different name changes are really just for the marketing teams, really, right? To convince people that this is new.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff that's in 5G NR is just technologies that were from the LTE era, with a few exceptions, right? But
yeah, when LTE Advanced came out, Verizon was real heavy-handed with the marketing on, look at this new technology that we created, and it's like, no, that's MIMO, right? That is a technology that is a standard, and everyone's going to start using that, and they did. But I thought it was really interesting that they came out and wanted to be the first to have something on paper, or so to speak, on paper, like they were the first to market to do it.
do you remember XLT?
What's that, Dennis?
I was gonna say,
XLT?
do you remember XLT?
Oh yeah, that was the 4x4 MIMO, multi-user MIMO, and that was like, I just don't get. I mean, the marketing teams are genius, right? Because people see that, they think, oh my goodness, like Verizon has this XLTE network that's just blazing fast. And at the time, it was, I don't know if you guys ever had Sprint back in, what was this, 2011 or 2010 when WiMAX was introduced. Do you remember WiMAX?
I remember WiMAX.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so WiMAX was Sprint's failed attempt at coming into the next generation after 3G. We had Sprint 3G, and then there was a fork in the road, right? You could either choose WiMAX as a technology to move on with for your next fourth generation of technology, or you could choose LTE. AT&T and Verizon made the smart decision and chose LTE. Sprint did not. And honestly, I've often felt that point in time really led Sprint to where they are today is not a company, because I felt like they were so far behind 2 to 3 years in LTE deployments that they never even caught up to AT&T and Verizon, which subsequently led to their demise a year ago when they were purchased by T-Mobile, because they were just bleeding customers and their network was terrible at the time. And I think those types of decisions are just really crucial to the longevity of a carrier.
I don't think that one decision is what actually broke the camel's back, though, to be honest. I mean,
Okay.
like if you think about it for a moment, T-Mobile didn't even get LTE on the map at all until like 2013, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, but they had HSPA Plus though, Dennis, and their HSPA Plus network, which again was still 3G, but HSPA Plus has a maximum like
42
rate
megabits.
of like 42 megabits. HSPA Plus was 42 megabits, and at the time, 2013, that was still really good. Even half of that, 20 megs, was really good.
I mean, I'll just say like T-Mobile, but like even T-Mobile's HSPA coverage, their 4G, was very limited. Most of T-Mobile's native coverage back in 2013 was Edge. There wasn't even 3G. It was just 2G Edge.
Yeah.
And they had small. I can't emphasize how small the pockets of HSPA Plus were.
Yeah, I never saw it personally. I mean, like I always had Edge when I had T-Mobile.
So for you, did it just jump from Edge to LTE?
Mm-hmm.
That must have been huge.
Yeah, it was huge. I mean, I remember the first time I got LTE with Sprint. It was like, it was like waking up in the morning feeling refreshed, as opposed to just going to bed really late and feeling groggy and tired. That was literally the feeling that I felt when Sprint got LTE. But yeah, I agree, Dennis. I mean, I don't think it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, but I think it was a very big issue at the time, and I think it really kind of led them down the path of, making bad decisions and doing things that were just not great.
On a side note, Stetson, I just want to say LTE was not the breath of fresh air for me, because T-Mobile didn't improve the backhaul for another 2 years.
Oh, so you got the little status bar in your phone, but the performance was still trash.
It was literally 1 megabit per second over LTE.
Okay, yep, that's pretty trash.
That was non-peak hours, by the way.
Sheesh. When we talk about like voice quality, kind of getting back to that, voice quality is measured in kilobits per second. So if I call you, Stetson, right now, a typical call over the wideband codec currently with voice over LTE is going to be about 64 kilobits per second.
Okay.
And that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're thinking about just traveling voice, like sending voice traffic across the wire, across the air, that's a lot of bandwidth for one voice call. And that's what you would expect to see. Like, that's what we see on landline phone calls. But you're getting landline voice quality across the air. And I mean, I feel like that's really good for voice over LTE.
That sounds incredible. And with the ultra wideband codec, that's basically the maximum throughput you could get with voice over LTE for audio, right?
That's right. Yep. And I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So the IVAS codec will support that, but the older codec that T-Mobile introduced back in 2016 was only up to 20 kilohertz of actual bandwidth. Like, so across the actual audio spectrum, you have different kilohertz that measures, low tones and high tones and things like that. and that allows you to have varying degrees of voice quality. So when you call in, like 20 years ago, you made a phone call that was like 8 kilohertz. That was nothing. That's why it sounded like you were talking in a tin can.
You were a robot.
You were a robot. It was just kind of like this, like, kind of like this.
You didn't need to disguise your voice. It was disguised for you.
Yeah, you didn't have to, because the system would do it for you. But now when you call people, especially, carrier to carrier, that support, those codecs, the super wideband codecs, and you guys have probably already seen it. I think T-Mobile markets it as HD calling, and I think Verizon does too. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Where you can call carrier to carrier, but when you pick up the phone, it sounds like the person is right in your ear. And that's because they're using all of that audio spectrum, all 20 kilohertz of that audio spectrum, to listen to your voice and then transmit it across the air.
So it sounds like quality is kind of a combination of getting the kilohertz of spectrum that you need to transmit the tonal range of the voice, in
That's
addition
right.
to the bandwidth to supply the actual data.
That's right, Stetson. Yeah, you can't transmit 20 kilohertz of bandwidth with 8 kilobits per second.
Okay, so they just
it's
go hand in hand.
It's like driving a tractor trailer through like a mouse hole, in a wall. It's just not going to happen.
Austin, real quick question for you, man.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi calling with the carriers has been something that has been very interesting recently.
I agree.
Especially because T-Mobile actually is going to be retiring their Wi-Fi calling 1.0. I was just wondering how Wi-Fi calling is different from voice over LTE or voice over NR, or is it literally just the same?
Yeah, it's not the same. One of the biggest differences we look at when we think about Wi-Fi calling, right, is when you turn on your phone, you have to manually enable Wi-Fi calling. Like it's a service, and it runs atop the data network. In voice over LTE land, you have to go into your phone settings, enable Wi-Fi calling, provide an emergency 911 address, agree to the terms, and then, I don't know, Android phones are different than iPhones or whatever, but the way it works is it creates a connection directly from your phone outbound to the internet, and it goes to a server either at T-Mobile, AT&T, or Verizon, or wherever you're enabling Wi-Fi calling for, and that's how the calls route through. So if I'm at my house and I enable Wi-Fi calling, there's a connection on my phone right now that registers over. I think it's either TCP. I think it's TCP. There's two different methods, TCP and UDP, but I think it's TCP, where it registers the device to that server and says, okay, this device is Wi-Fi calling capable. We have an active connection to it. Let's go. And that's how it knows to route the call inbound to you if you receive a call. Because otherwise, like if you have a phone that doesn't have any service and you don't have Wi-Fi calling enabled, the carrier is not going to know where to route that call to. But if you have Wi-Fi calling turned on and you have it registered to their IMS server, they're able to see in real time, like, okay, we know that Dennis has a Wi-Fi connection currently. This is his IP address that it's being sourced from. We're going to send the call to that. And that's how they guarantee calls make it to you. So
Wow.
they're very different, Dennis, in how they route call. They're still a voice over IP technology, since they're still routing calls over a network. But in the Wi-Fi calling realm, it's all done over the internet, whereas opposed the voice over LTE is done over the cellular network.
It sounds like there's a server basically acting as an intermediary then between your phone. Like it's acting as your phone, receiving a call, and then, okay, boom, we have a connection. This person's on Wi-Fi. We're completing the call with that. Whereas if you're on LTE, it's just using the data as it normally would.
Right. And you've probably seen, again, I'm not 100% sure how Android shows it. I think Samsung does it different than Google. But on iPhones, if you look in the top bar, you'll see carrier name, Wi-Fi, Y-Fi. And that signifies that your phone is connected to that server and registered essentially to enable you for Wi-Fi calling. And that's why, we've seen a lot of stuff on Reddit where some customers that are using the T-Mobile home internet service have had issues with Wi-Fi calling. And I don't know, I've heard some people say that it was fixed with a firmware upgrade. Some people reboot their phones. There's really no telling why that doesn't work, but it's really dependent on the connection from your device over your Wi-Fi network at your home or your office or wherever you're at. And eventually it's going to find its way to T-Mobile's network to where it
That's
has a presence.
actually a great point. We have a question in the live chat for someone joining the YouTube live stream. And the question is, how does your phone know if your service strength is low enough to enable Wi-Fi calling? It sounds like, where is that threshold, that cutoff point where you're like, all right, I don't have enough service, we're going to Wi-Fi calling? Or is it like anytime you're connected to Wi-Fi, you're just getting routed on Wi-Fi calling?
It's not all the time. I know, I don't know for other carriers, but for me, like with T-Mobile, I typically see with an RSRP of 100 or 100 or higher, like negative 100 or higher, and I'm connected to Wi-Fi and I have Wi-Fi calling turned on, it will opt for Wi-Fi calling over the voice over LTE network, just because it's a better like signal. Yeah, I don't know how it would be for AT&T or Verizon, but there's definitely a threshold for each carrier that is an acceptable threshold as far as like RSRP, RSRQ, SINR. All those numbers play into how they calculate where to route the call.
And those just indicate signal strength to your tower, right? So your RSR, and like that's just how strong your cellular signal is.
Yeah, it's strength of signal, but it's also noise. So SINR is measuring the level of radio interference that's going on between your phone and the tower. So if like you have like you've probably seen this before, and you too, Dennis, right? You've seen your phones show 5 bars of signal, and then you run a speed test, and you get like 0.5 down and then 0.5 up. That's not always a sign of congestion. You could just really have a lot of interference, and that could be causing that.
That is so cool.
On a side note, I was just going to say, I'm pretty sure that it's not even the carrier that's determining, it's your phone. Your phone's just looking at the signal levels and being like, okay, at this point, which my carrier determined based on the firmware, I will use Wi-Fi calling and vice versa.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I don't know. I mean, they're not making a decision in real time. Like, hey, like we're tracking Dennis's phone and we're looking at all the numbers all the time. I'm sure there's something in the software of the device that determines that.
I'm saying it is the client device is what I'm saying. That would be the most logical way to do it, right? Because it would be stupid to like if you had weak
try to
signal
probe real time.
Yeah, like it'd be stupid. Like if the person doesn't have good signal, then how the heck are you going to know? Like when you're trying to send out your
right? You wouldn't know, because if they don't have good signal, then you can't get accurate information.
So it would just be the client device.
Yeah.
But circling back real quick though, do you know? So we were talking about the super wideband audio codec that's used for voice over LTE, but do you know what the codec is that's used for Wi-Fi calling?
I don't. I would assume that they're also using the IVAS codec, which is the super wideband codec, because I'm sure, like, I haven't done testing to see what that would look like, but I know when I do a Wi-Fi call and when I do a voice over LTE call, they're very similar in call quality. So I would imagine they're probably similar, Dennis.
And do you know why? I mean, did you hear about T-Mobile retiring their 1.0 variation of Wi-Fi calling? Do you know what the differences were between that and like? No,
I haven't heard that. Where was that announced?
Well, honestly, I heard about it from Sneed Local Tech.
Gotcha. I had not heard about that. I mean, I'm sure he's got the inside scoop with all the T-Mobile folks, so I'm sure what he says is the gospel, because I think he has some friends that work there.
Yeah, no, but like basically they're going to be retiring Wi-Fi calling 1.0, which it only affects like older phones. But I was hoping that you might be able to know what was different about that.
I didn't know it was specific to so I didn't know what the 1.0 mention was there, Dennis. But I did see recently. I've been following the T-Mobile community and also the Reddit forums for the T-Mobile subreddit, but they have been emailing customers letting them know that their phones will no longer be compatible. And I saw, not specifically to T-Mobile, but other carriers are sending out free phones to people. So it seems like if you play the long game with these carriers, eventually you'll get a phone. But yeah, I saw that they were going to be doing that, and I guess they call it Wi-Fi calling 1.0, where they're going to require you to have a more modern device that probably supports wideband audio and much better codecs and has better hardware to actually send and receive those calls.
Sure. All right, I have a slightly different question, and it's when you make a call over voice over LTE or voice over Wi-Fi, I feel like it sounds pretty good. As you mentioned, you have enough capacity to transmit voice. But when I make a FaceTime audio call, it just sounds night and day, crystal clear. The person's voice is in my ear. I'm getting all the intonations. So I'm wondering, what is going on with FaceTime audio that is just making it so much more realistic and providing all of that vocal clarity that I feel like you may be missing with some of the other voice technologies. Would you know, maybe it's the codec or how is that working?
Yeah, as far as I know, Stetson, originally when FaceTime came out, they were using the H.264 codec.
Okay.
And that was an industry standard codec back in 2012, or kind of in that realm. And then we've moved on to H.265, which is now called the HEVC codec, which allows for higher
quality
higher quality audio and video through higher bit rates. So the new HEVC codec, as I understand it, will allow up for 1,000 hertz. So you can get the spectrum is all the way from I think it's 0 to 1,000 hertz. So you can really get all of the tonal differences between breathing and your voice and shouting and excitement and all the things that you would hear in person with your ears. You can hear that all now through the wire. But I agree with you though. I when I call people and I know they have iPhones, I'll just FaceTime audio with them. It's 100%. A much better experience than trying to do a normal voice over LTE call, even though that's really good. And even Wi-Fi calling is really good too. But I agree. If they have FaceTime audio, that is absolutely the best way to do it.
You know what's the best audio though?
What is that?
Good old school analog.
Oh, Dennis, get out of here. I do work with some folks that, and I won't say their names, but I do work with some folks who are older that would absolutely agree with you. The whole old analog phone, 8-bit or 8 hertz, stuff like that. They just love the way that sounds, how it sounds kind of like velvety and raspy, whereas the new wider super wideband audio sounds very digitized and robotic and just doesn't sound natural because you're not used to hearing that. But I imagine in 20 years, people are going to think, okay, well, this super wideband audio sounds so good. And then there's going to be a new wideband audio, even the super wideband audio.
I don't know.
I don't know what that would look like, but my guess is it's just a personal preference.
I honestly prefer my voice though when it is compressed sometimes. For example, with this mic, I can actually go in and change, what audio it picks up. Like right now I have it on natural to sound normal, but some, how specifically really old mics from say the 50s and stuff, that radio host sound, what the really old mics.
Yeah. What's it called? The, Shawshank Redemption, have you seen that movie where they have
I haven't. But there's a specific sound that comes from those old mics that I'm talking about, and the same thing can be said from the original old school analog phones. Your voice just sounds sometimes different. Mine, for example, when it's compressed like that, makes it sound much deeper, much more manly.
Just hello.
Hello. Welcome to the podcast. Everyone's talking with a super deep voice because we got
we're all
new microphones.
Eating steaks and drinking wine and and reading by the fire.
Stetson, your deep voice sound made you sound more like a smoker than trying to lower your voice.
That's funny. Okay.
Funny.
My next question is, we talked about voice over LTE. It sounds like that's widely available. Voice over NR. How can our audience, our viewers, our listeners go out and experience voice over NR? Do you need a certain phone? Do you need a certain network? Where is this new evolution of call quality?
So as of probably a month ago, the last time I saw it, the only device that I have seen that is currently using voice over NR is the T-Mobile OnePlus 8.
No way.
And the OnePlus 9. They have in the OnePlus, on the phone itself, if you go into the band selector, it's kind of you can turn on or turn off 5G. If you turn 5G only to on and you disable all the 4G LTE bands and you place a call, about 6 months ago, that would not work. But up until, like I said, about a month ago was the last time I saw it work. You can actually place a call and route your calls over voice over NR. And the way to tell, number one, does the call work? Because if it doesn't, and the cell site that you're calling from does not support voice over NR, which would mean a standalone voice network, because you can't route voice over NR over non-standalone 5G. From what I've seen.
That's actually perfect. We had someone in the chat who was wondering about that. Would voice over NR work well over non-standalone 5G or only standalone?
That's right. Yeah, I've not seen a way, and I think that's by design, right? Is that, in order to route voice over NR traffic to its destination, you've got to have a 5G core. And when we talk about, enabling 4G and 5G at the same time, when you place a call, it's going to be preferred to route over LTE rather than NR. And I haven't found a way to change that. But going back to what I was saying earlier, Stetson, T-Mobile seems to be the only company, only carrier in the U.S. that I've seen that has voice over NR support. AT&T and Verizon have, come out and said, hey, obviously we're planning it, it's in the works, whatever. But in the real world, used by real people, that's the only carrier that I've seen it work on.
As far as the phones, though, I'm pretty sure, Austin, that the S20 supports it.
The chip might support it, Dennis. I'm just saying, from what I've seen out there in the wild, I mean, if someone out there has a device, try turning all 4G LTE off and do 5G only and make a call. And you can make sure, you can look to see if you're on 5G standalone by just pressing. There's a key command on the Samsungs where you can look at all the bands, right, guys? Yeah. Just like it's like an iPhone field test mode where you can look to see, are you connected to NSA or standalone? But yeah, if it supports it, Dennis, I would imagine it would work. But I've only ever seen it work on the OnePlus.
Do you want to test it? Do you want to test it right now, Stetson, real quick?
That'd be cool.
Yeah, if you want to. I mean, give me a call.
I just put on band selection.
Do you have your OnePlus 9, Stetson?
This is an S20 Plus.
Dennis is trying it right now.
So Stetson, I'm on NR 71 only.
Okay.
I'm
getting a call. Going. I'm answering the call.
How do I sound?
Do I hold it up to the microphone? That's going to cause so much echo.
Yeah, I can hear it, but I sound good, right?
I mean, you sound good. Like a normal call, I would say. I think the podcast sounds way better, but that's just me.
Yeah, well, I would hope so, right? I mean, it's kind of a tough demo. Dennis put you on the spot.
I would say it went through.
Yeah, it worked. So
yeah, and what I've found, at least in my testing around where I live, that will be hit or miss, or at least it was 6 months ago, because some sites don't have 600 megahertz. Like they say they've deployed it to like 200 million people, but where I live, some cell sites simply don't have that. So like if you don't have 5G standalone and you turn your phone to 5G only and you try to make a voice over NR call, it will not work. It will attempt to dial and it will just fail.
So it sounds like
that's how you know.
If you're on 5G only and you've disabled all other bands and you place a call and it goes through, then it will be voice over NR, because that is the only way to make a call at that point.
That is the only way to make a call.
That is so
voice
cool.
Over NR. Yep.
Austin, I am so curious now. I want to go out and test this. I want to grab my Samsung phones and my iPhone. I can't do it on iPhone because you can't disable the bands, but I want to grab my Samsung phones, drive around Colorado, and see if I can get some of that voice over NR experience. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it's cool. We recently just got, at my house, we got the tower closest to it is about, I'd say like a mile and a half, but we've got 600 megahertz here. And voice over NR works great. It works just as good as voice over LTE. It's weird to see the next evolution, since we went through the first evolution of really the first real evolution of voice from 3G to LTE. Because honestly, we didn't talk about 2G to 3G, but we didn't need to. I sat in line in 2007, I believe, and bought the first iPhone.
Wow.
And that was when they had the Edge network. That was it. You could get like 56K dial-up speeds across Edge, and even making a phone call, it did not sound great. The web browsing was terrible. All of anything data intensive never worked. So to go from using a codec that has a higher bit rate than what the fastest data speed was 14 years ago, it's really cool. And I'm
really
excited to see where the next 10 years takes us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know there are actually some devices now that allow, like for a podcast scenario, you can call in and have a phone plugged into a recorder and
Hmm.
answer a call normally and it'll record. And yeah, it's going to sound a little bit like someone's talking on the phone, but the audio quality is so good. Like that's actually quite passable for kind of a podcast listening experience. And
Yeah.
it's been really cool seeing that evolution. So I think maybe to conclude this segment, unless there's other things you want to mention, but my
Well,
question would be, what is your preferred way to make a phone call?
oh, well, I make a lot of phone calls, Stetson. I have phones everywhere, all over my house. I've got phones over here. I've got a desk phone. I've got two cell phones. Primarily when I join meetings for work, I use Zoom and WebEx and Skype. I personally prefer to use the actual audio, like computer audio, on my device, whatever I'm calling it on, rather than use like dialing a 10-digit number. You've
Right.
seen meetings where you can dial the number, put the meeting code in, you put the password in. It's like 4 steps to just call into this meeting. And since I joined so many of them, I like to just hit the button, and it uses just voice over IP audio, and uses the G711 codec, super wideband to go into the meeting. For me though, if I'm calling my wife or if I'm calling my sister, family member, or whatever, I'll just pick up the call or pick up the phone and dial FaceTime audio. It's just
Yeah.
they all have iPhones, and it's just such a great experience. So
Absolutely.
if you
Absolutely.
can do it, great. If you're like Dennis and you just love the Android life, I think Voice over LTE is an absolutely great option that you can use for that. The other thing, Stetson, that don't think we've touched on, and there's really not a whole lot of information about this out there, but I want to just bring this up. So we've all used FaceTime before over LTE, right? And we've all used Google Duo and all of the video chat apps, Skype, whatever. With the introduction of 5G, there's a new technology called video over NR, and
Whoa.
it's gonna allow carriers to actually deliver video headless and without apps. So right now, what they have is you download an app, you sign in with an account, then you leverage the LTE network to actually route that traffic from wherever you are to wherever it needs to go. With video over NR, the carrier was going to be able to enable video directly at the core. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to download any apps. You don't have to like sign in or anything. It's just going to be part of the phone, like the native dialer is on your phone. You just press the phone button and you dial 10 digits and it calls a number. Video over NR is going to allow you to have a way to do that without involving the App Store, the Google Play Store, or whatever. So I'm
T-Mobile
excited to see what that looks like, over the next couple of years.
T-Mobile already has that feature actually, with
I
LTE.
saw they ran the test, Dennis, but I didn't. I mean, I haven't seen like I saw that they recently ran the first commercial test over video over NR, but is there a use case that you found?
No, I mean they've had that since LTE. I mean it's voice, like they have video over LTE, like that's already a thing. Like if you, it does. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't work cross carrier. You have to be like a
Hmm.
T-Mobile call, but like
Hmm.
it's literally built into the dialer. So like Austin, if you had T-Mobile and you had an Android phone that supported it, meaning you could have a video call over LTE.
Hmm.
And
Interesting. Yeah,
and
yeah, but I mean, you said it's only carrier. It's like carrier limited, right? It's only for T-Mobile customers. I mean, that sounds like
right.
a pretty siloed system. I would imagine that 5G would open that up to
I
others,
mean,
but.
I mean it's not really. I mean it's not really that different from when voice over LTE was a thing, right? Like when voice over LTE was first
Hmm.
executed upon, there wasn't cross, like you weren't able to do like an HD call and stuff like that between AT&T and T-Mobile customers when HD.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, this is no different, right? Like there's
Hmm.
certain things that just get a little wonky because the carriers, you know,
Yeah, they're all
add their
doing different stuff,
It
and
boggles my mind. I actually remember I would do text message tests, and if I was texting across different networks, the 160 character limit would come into play, and the message would be split up into multiple chunks. But I found if I was texting network to network, oftentimes it would come in as just one cohesive message, like in order, not split up. So yeah, I wish they worked better. Hearing this news, Austin, I'm first super excited, but also very concerned because if you followed what's happened with RCS, it basically hasn't
oh, what
happened,
a disaster.
and
Yeah,
and
what
I
a
feel like
disaster that is.
I feel like so many people text or message more than they call at this point, at least, some of the younger generation. And that, I'm going to be honest, just doesn't leave me optimistic with how this video over NR implementation will pan out, the compatibility and things like that.
Yeah, they relate to the game, right? And I think the ship has probably sailed. For a lot of people that use phones today, they have their favorite apps they use and all the things they log into with their accounts and stuff. But I mean, RCS, man, we can't even get into that. That is such a disaster. That they have butchered that so bad. Not coming to an agreement on a replacement for SMS. I mean, SMS is so antiquated in the way that it works, and the character limits and the compression of sending pictures, because SMS was never designed to send pictures when it first came out,
right?
And then they were like, what if we just shove this picture in this little tiny like datagram and send it on? And now because you've sent like SMS pictures from an iPhone to an Android phone before, it's terrible.
It looks like a potato.
SMS quite literally was one of the most profitable things for the carriers back when they charged for it, because it literally used so little data, and it's so low cost to operate. It's hilarious. As far as RCS is concerned, I think that RCS is already behind the curveball anyway. It's great. It's better than SMS in a lot of ways, but it sucks that it's not encrypted. That sucks from a security standpoint. And as far as file size, I think it still only caps out at 10 megabytes, I think, if memory serves me.
Is that RCS?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I saw recently, Dennis, to your point about encryption, I saw there was an article back before Christmas of 2020 that Google was working to roll out end-to-end encryption in the Android Messages app for RCS.
But that's not.
But again, that would require everyone to have that app, and not every. Yeah, and that's the problem, right?
That is the inherent problem. Is not everyone has that app.
Yeah, I'm saying, at this point, RCS should just be scrapped. They should just do a new standard. Encryption should be baked in. Seriously.
Okay, blow the doors off. We're done. Start over. Back to the drawing board.
At this point, just start over.
It was a dumpster fire. We're gonna put it out. We're gonna roll the dumpster over there and forget about it.
I mean, you think I'm joking, but I'm being really quite serious. Every carrier has done a different implementation of advanced messaging. AT&T calls it advanced messaging, and they have their thing where if you're talking to AT&T customers, it works. T-Mobile has their thing, but there's no crosstalk anyway. So since we're still not on the same page, right? Yeah. And the standard we're trying to deploy anyway is already inherently flawed. Instead of trying to force roll out this inherently flawed standard, we should go back to the drawing board, execute upon something that's actually future-proof, i.e., focus on the security vulnerabilities that are within this new messaging system that need to be addressed, because, we kind of use our phones for two-factor authentication, so encryption would probably be important. And then just deploy that.
Yeah, and I find my guess is that'll never happen, because I think one of the things that I say people, but local governments, law enforcement, other entities love about SMS is that they can subpoena carriers for that record of information. But when you go call Apple for that stuff, they're like, sorry, get out of here. Yeah. And I think encryption is a wide-ranging topic that we probably don't have time for today. But encrypted messages, like messaging apps, introducing a whole different degree of vulnerabilities and what's ethical and what people should do, because right now today, if you send an SMS, the carrier can just go look at their server and say, okay, yep, Stetson said Dennis, he was ordering you a pizza for dinner, or you guys are going to the park together or whatever. But with iMessage, you'll never know. You can't see that information. And I think that's the problem. Well, the problem. Yeah, that's how it should be. But that's the problem, because people lobby for these technologies that are antiquated that allow you to do these things.
Yeah, but then here's the thing, though. A lot of banks and my job and other things require two-factor authentication, and a lot of them don't use an authenticator app or don't even have it baked in. They use SMS two-factor authentication, and it is incredibly easy for me to get your 6-digit PIN that you get sent and use that against you to get in and break into your accounts. I don't even need to have access to your phone or SIM card. I can literally, there's other ways for me to do it. I won't get into all of them right now, but if we're going to put in a new system, we should probably address that concern, considering that it's going to impact everyone, including law enforcement, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Dennis. I mean, there's got to be a solution, right? With all these smart talking heads, both in Washington and in the tech field, I'm sure that someone can come up with a new standard that works with all the carriers and everyone can be happy with.
But and plus, it's not like the government couldn't have they could have their own private way to break the encryption, right? As long as they have the
Yeah, and I think that's the point of contention, right? Is that they went to Apple years ago when there were shootings and things like that had gone on, and Apple was like, we're not going to give you that.
Apple had to
can't
take a stand.
They went to court and they were just like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
And
but I'm just saying let's have encryption. Even if the government has a back door, let's have something there than nothing at all, is my point. But let us move on from this topic, because I definitely took us somewhere that we probably shouldn't go. Let's answer some Patreon questions, Stetson.
Yeah. So first one actually came from the beginning of the recording, and it's, what are the 3GPP release? I think the question is values. It says valves, and valves doesn't make sense to me. So release values, or is there a place, if that's a long list, that we can direct people to check out the 3GPP and to learn more about their evolutions?
They have their own website where they talk about it all the time. In fact, I can probably pull it up for you in the chat and link it in the comments.
Awesome. Dennis, you do that. We will move on. Next question. Let's go to Mark. What is one foreign country you have not been to and plan on visiting soon? Gentlemen, and planning on doing any travels? I feel like a lot of travel plans have been scrapped the past years, but maybe things open up.
That's an interesting question, Mark. Thanks for the question. Country I have not been to. I've not been to Germany, and I have not been to Japan. Those are kind of on my bucket list. I want to go to Japan. That's one of the next countries I want to visit. Go to Tokyo and kind of go downtown and see what's going on there. I've been to a lot of countries all over the world, and I'd say honestly, one of the coolest places to go visit if you get the chance is go to Scotland. It's a really beautiful place to go. A lot of really nice people, a lot of good food, if you like that kind of stuff. But I'd say Japan. Japan for sure, and Germany would be the two coolest countries to go.
Let's go together, Austin. When we're in Japan, we can try out some of the nice whiskey. They're actually really well known for their whiskey.
Yeah, like some Hibiki and all the different style, whatever you want, like the Nika coffee grain, and name a couple. Just to name a couple.
We'll get some of their fancy melons too that are exclusive to Japan.
I'm down with all of it, Dennis. I love Japanese culture. Honestly, it's so cool to see, and there's so many documentaries that I've watched over the past couple of years on not only Japanese culture but cuisine and things like that. It's just exciting.
I'm well researched, man. I watch tons of anime, so I obviously know everything about Japanese culture.
Yes, I actually work with a guy. He's a quarter Japanese. He doesn't necessarily look Japanese, but somewhere up in his bloodline, he's Japanese, and he talks about one day wanting to go back and everything like that. So I think it'd be a cool trip if we could put that together. Maybe you can go too, Mark. If you're interested.
And Stetson, we got to bring Stetson along.
Yeah,
I should probably get outside the house. It's probably good for me.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, open those curtains up a bit, huh?
Yeah. I would say I haven't been to Australia yet, and I feel like that would be a cool place to check out.
Stetson, I feel like if you went to Australia, either one of three things would happen. Either a kangaroo
develop an accent.
I would get an Australian accent.
I was going to say either a kangaroo would kick you really hard, some scary spider would come into your hotel and bite you in your sleep, or you'll just have an awesome time.
I'll have an awesome time. I'll sign up for Boost Mobile Australia. Give it a try.
Yeah, and call Peter and see what's going on.
Because Australia is a scary place, man. That's where all the scary animals are.
So the top 10 snakes in the world live there, all of them.
And the most deadliest spiders. They're like a common.
Maybe Thailand or something then.
Oh, I was there for a week, Stetson.
All right. We got to move on. So from your international travels, this question comes from KO. What are at least two things other countries are doing in wireless communications that you, A, believe could happen in the U.S. in the next 5 years, and B, want to see happen in the U.S.?
Well, I will say, I was back in 2018. I went to London. I was there for a week, and I guess one of the biggest challenges with living in the United States and being a carrier in the United States is just how much landmass there is compared to other countries. We were already seeing, even in 2018, full on like mass deployments of 5G radios, 5G towers, things like that, just getting ready for, for the deployment. And then one day they just turned it all on and now the whole country's lit up with full 5G. And, I know T-Mobile recently did that too with their nationwide 5G network, and they covered, 200 million some odd people. But people always make the claim like, oh, the United States is, not number one in cellular technology and deployments. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, no kidding. I mean, look at the size of Japan and look at the size of England and Scotland, and you compare that to the size of the U.S. The speed in which they deploy technology is great. And to that question, I'd like to see us deploy like technology much quicker than we do. There's so much red tape to cut through. We've got a project I'm working on right now where it's been like 4 months since we ordered fiber, and it's permitting for cities and cutting up roads and doing things that I would imagine in other countries or in other regions that are not as as well developed would not require that. And I think that is because we have so much land mass and there's so much logistics that go into either running fiber or building a new cell tower. It just takes too long. It shouldn't take 8 months or 10 months to build a tower in a cornfield.
Well, yeah, we just want it. It's
Yeah,
going to
we just
benefit
want
so
it,
many
right?
people immediately.
We just want it. It just shouldn't take that long though. But as far as to the first part of that question, what do I want to see? I mean, I want to see us move quicker in deployment of technology standards and get things done, like cut through the red tape of permitting and wait periods and all the things that are associated with deploying either fiber or new cell towers.
What's the second thing?
Second thing, I would say, so compatibility, Dennis. One of the things that I noticed when I was in Ireland, moving countries just a little bit, was when you go into a cell phone store, you can just buy a SIM card or you can buy a phone, and all the phones that they have and sell, they all work together. Like there's no special provisioning or anything like that you have to do. Like some carriers don't support certain cell phones, right? You have to have a specific model of a variant. Like with Verizon, they do their own custom OnePlus phones. They used to do their own Motorola Droids that were different from T-Mobile and AT&T. And even when iPhones came out, there were Sprint specific iPhones or AT&T specific iPhones or Verizon ones. Other countries have really come together on doing a standard, and they say, okay, these are the LTE bands we're going to use, governed by this governing body. We're going to deploy all the same stuff, and then you can just roam on our network. And then the differentiator is in level of service you get with the carrier. What kind of plans, how much you're paying, what perks you get. But they're all using the same infrastructure, right? EE is sharing it with Vodafone, and Vodafone is sharing it with Orange. Everyone works together much more collaboratively rather than in the U.S. where T-Mobile is just like, nah, you're not going to roam on our network, or Verizon doesn't roam on AT&T. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I agree with that sentiment. I lived in Korea for a month, and there's literally two carriers, and they share all the same coverage. They literally share the same back fiber, everything, and it's a way better experience from like an end consumer standpoint, and it's way more efficient use of the spectrum. I will just say that problem is resolving itself with time. I mean, as CDMA gets shut down, all LTE is GSM based, and all NR is going to be the same like standard. And most phones that come to the U.S. at this point do support pretty much everything with the exception of maybe millimeter wave for the different carriers. So that problem is resolving itself slowly. Now, as far as sharing of the networks is concerned, that's not going to resolve itself for obvious reasons. But
I wish that there was a I know how like the way Apple does their iPhones in the US, they give you a dual SIM, right? So one slot is eSIM and one slot is physical SIM. I've heard that in like countries like China, they just offer the same phone, but they give a tray with two SIM slots, two physical
Yes.
SIMs.
Yeah.
I would like to see manufacturers come to an agreement with one another for countries and radios to support all the same bands, because I find it really frustrating that like you can buy a phone. Like let's say you don't want to spend $1,000 on an iPhone. You want to spend $500. Well, maybe you buy that $500 phone and then one day you decide you want to travel to Germany. Well, Germany might not support the 5G bands that your phone has. And there's just a disconnect between the manufacturers of these devices in what they support and what these countries are deploying. I don't understand why we're not more like centralized as a whole in what we support from a hardware perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And one of the things for me is like I know Apple released, I think it was the iPhone 10 in China, actually had a dual physical SIM card, and
Yeah.
in the United States it was just one physical SIM with the eSIM. I would have loved to have seen dual physical in the US as well. And then as you mentioned, just like like global compatibility with the networks for all these devices. Like they should be global. You shouldn't need all these different models. I think that would
Yeah.
make for a way better consumer experience.
Yeah, definitely. And on that topic, Stetson, and we can move on after this, but I just wanted to say, um, OnePlus drives me up the wall when it comes to the nonsense, and even Samsung up until recently, where they will have their US model of their phone. Like if you buy a OnePlus from T-Mobile, you get the phone that has like one SIM slot. But if you buy the same phone in like China or like Thailand or wherever or India, they have two SIM slots. I don't get why you wouldn't just make one phone and have the
Yeah,
same features.
right.
Why would you do that?
I honestly
Because
don't have the answer. I mean, maybe economics somehow.
because I mean the reason is because two reasons. One is that in those markets, dual SIM's important because, like you mentioned, India, for example, it's very regionalized in what networks cover where. Like here in the U.S., we have a lot of like overlap, right? Like Pittsburgh's going to have coverage from T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon, right? India, you're going to have cities where it's just like literally actually just one option,
Hmm.
like legitimately. Um, and then as far as why make two different phones, it goes back to different band support, right? It is cheaper to have a whole second model of a phone that you don't have to pay royalties on to Qualcomm, who has like a monopoly on all these different band supports that the US uses, and just make a global phone that supports bands like 1, 2, whatever the common denominator of bands is. You can reduce your expenses on your phone sales, which improves profit margins, which at the end of the day, it all comes down to money.
Yeah.
So
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that totally makes sense, Dennis. I get it. I find it annoying that I, as a consumer, would have to, you know, find another phone that would
Yeah,
support
yeah.
the network when I go to that visit that country. It's just
It's
interesting.
annoying. Yeah, yeah.
It's
No, you're
I
annoying.
right.
mean, I mean, most phones have support for common bands. Like if you go to India, you're gonna be fine. Like your iPhone. I mean, iPhones are a great example. They literally
They're one of the
support.
best.
Yeah, like
Hmm.
and like same thing with like Samsung phones. Same thing with
Hmm.
Google Pixel phones. Like most main brand phones that are here in the U.S. are gonna have support for pretty much all networks, right? Because
Yeah.
all networks, generally speaking, are GSM based, and we're one of the only few countries that has CDMA based networks aside from like China and like Korea. And guess what? Our phones have support for CDMA. So US phones are literally the best phones for travel. It's
Mm.
not that it's bad the opposite way around. People that come to the US, I feel bad for you. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm in
But
their court, okay, Dennis. Okay, I'm supporting them. Like I
Yeah,
feel bad too.
yeah, yeah.
I feel bad too.
Okay.
we have another question for you. And it's from KO. Did you already ask him this question? The second
No,
one?
KO asked two questions.
Okay, sorry. So KO asked the second question. He asked, what are at least two changes that need to be made in order to catapult the US from a 4G communication experience to a 5G communication experience? And what does that translate into for the average consumer?
That's a great question. I think well, obviously we'll just get this first one out of the way. The first issue is that people don't have 5G phones. So in order to get people off the 4G network to the 5G network, they've got to have a device that's compatible. And I think with the normal cycles that people go through between 3 to 5 years of upgrading their phones. I mean, I don't imagine that everyone in this country or even around the world is like us, where we get a new phone every year, or Stetson every 6 months.
Every
You're not
3
buying the
months.
latest device and selling it on Swappa. So yeah, I think 3 to 5 years is probably going to be the time that we see that transition. AT&T and Verizon up until recently didn't even have a 5G network, and arguably I would say they still don't really. They've
They
got
don't.
millimeter
They have a
wave
fake
paired.
one.
Yeah, they've got millimeter wave, which is great and awesome. The speeds are insane. I actually saw a millimeter wave for the first time today, where I live in downtown, and it was insane, like
No way.
1,500 megabits
Were you
per
T-Mobile?
second.
Is this a T-Mobile site?
This
or
was
is
on
this...
AT&T. This was on
Wow.
AT&T. Yeah, I went to lunch with a friend of mine, and he had an AT&T phone, and we were sitting there eating lunch, and he was like, "What is this 5G plus indicator on my phone?" And I was like, "Oh, this is, you must get millimeter wave." And he speed tested, and it was just absolutely blazing. So I think, the first answer to that question is, we've got to get handsets into the hands of people, and that's going to happen, in 3 to 5 years. We've also got to lower the cost of handsets. I mean, the cost of a 5G phone compared to the cost of a 4G LTE phone today is substantial. Even the cheapest 5G phone. Now, I see you shaking your head, Dennis. We recently, T-Mobile is giving away phones with some of their phones. Like if you bring in an old crappy bag phone or whatever, you can actually get a free 5G phone. And I think that's really the first phone that I've seen that was in a reasonable price point for a lot of people, because not everyone spends $1,000 on a cell phone. And I think you're gonna have to get a lot more like options for people in that $200 to $400 range, because the iPhone SE was what people wanted 2 years ago. The second iteration of the iPhone SE, which was just a rebranded iPhone 8.
Yeah.
That was such a weird design, but that was kind of like the $399 price was kind of what people were willing to pay out of pocket without financing it. So I think if we can get more devices like that, we're going to see a lot more. But
I can think of literally 10 phones off the top of my head that are in that price point, with Motorola's one 5G Ace being like $300 and free right now from a lot of carriers. Galaxy A42 is coming out around the corner. That's at that $400.
Not out yet though, right? So that's
it's coming out.
That's not on the list.
It's literally coming out tomorrow.
Well, my point, Dennis, I agree with you, and I say that there probably are more than one, or two that I've mentioned. I'm just saying, like, those phones did not come out until like the last 8 to 10 months, and that's probably in the time frame which people are still fine with their 4G LTE network phones. I mean, I know people that are on AT&T currently, and you included, Dennis, that have no issue with capacity or features or anything like that. AT&T's network is insane. Their LTE network has so much capacity that even moving to 5G really is not going to be a substantial move for them, because they're going to supplement that with millimeter wave. So I get your point, Dennis, and I agree with you that there are probably a bunch of phones out now. I just think we need to see more phones, and we need to get more in that price range. And people need to know about them. People don't know about the Motorola Ace or the Galaxy Stetson Dennis phone, or what these obscure brands and these obscure series of phones that they sell like at Walmart and Target. People don't go buy those. They buy them online and they buy them in stores. They're not selling these phones like on the showcase. And maybe they are. I know when I talk to my friends, they know, Samsung phones, Google phones, iPhones. Yeah. And currently there's not an iPhone that is within even, like shouting distance that costs, what does the iPhone 12 mini cost? $650? That's the cheapest.
700.
Is it 700? Yeah. So the only 5G phone they sell is $700, and Apple has, like a pretty substantial market share in, the cell phone space. And I know it's like Samsung and Google and all those big players too. They have a much bigger share, but I just think we need to see more. I think we need to see more devices.
I think that's a great point. I mean, we're seeing more and more now, but people aren't ready to upgrade. And I think what's challenging is, even as new budget 5G phones come out, like last year's flagship LTE phones are approaching really good prices. Like you can get an S10 for a really good price at this point. And some people may be interested in that. And as you mentioned, like this is the first generation of 5G iPhones. So people who are really into the iPhone ecosystem and Apple's ecosystem, they're not really going to have a budget option until Apple releases one, which I think is a little unlikely at the moment. Or, it's 3 to 4 years down the road, and this year's iPhone 12 is suddenly selling for like $400 or maybe $300 on a gently used site, or there's a trade-in deal or something.
I just disagree. Like, I just don't think cost of the phone necessarily matters, because your average consumer isn't buying their phone outright. Like, they're paying $5 or $10 or whatever the payment is on their phone plan. So if the phone's $1,000, that's not what's like stopping them. I think that the bigger issue here is that 5G isn't doing anything meaningful for consumers to make them want to upgrade for that reason. Like, if they have a Galaxy S9 Plus, which is a fantastic phone that I had prior to my S20, right? I'm not upgrading it because of 5G. 5G isn't doing jack diddly right now. There's no apps that do anything that LTE can't handle. It's not like back in the day when like LTE came around and we started seeing things like Google Maps take off, and we started seeing like, Uber Eats and all these other services that needed LTE to work, like come out of the woodwork, right? Like 5G is not doing anything special at the moment.
And I would agree with that too, Dennis, but only in your case because you have AT&T. Like I said earlier, AT&T's LTE network is so robust, and for you, totally, like you probably are not getting anything. If anything, moving from LTE to 5G on AT&T's nationwide 5G that's using dynamic spectrum sharing is probably worse, because you're sharing that bandwidth, with the LTE network.
Yeah.
So I agree, Dennis, with that, with that sentiment. I just, availability is definitely a big thing, but also for you, you're on AT&T, but like for me, I'm on T-Mobile. So for me, making the jump from T-Mobile's 4G LTE network to their 5G network was substantial. Like they just didn't have a lot of spectrum in my market, in LTE. So when I moved to 5G and I saw like like N41 mid-band, it was night and day. But I've seen AT&T get mid-band speeds on their LTE network using carrier ag. I mean, it's crazy what AT&T is able to do as far as speeds go, just from a capacity standpoint.
Absolutely. All right, so we got to round this question off. Two things. We need more affordable 5G phones, and we need people to get them and buy them. That's one thing to leapfrog 5G. Second thing, I would honestly just say C-band. Like, we need that mid-band spectrum to really offer that, like, improved performance in way more locations.
Do you guys think, I know I saw an article recently where Verizon was saying that they've already started deployment of, new antennas and towers and things like that to support, C-band. Where do you think that ends up, Dennis? This is a question for you. Where do you think timeline-wise that ends up getting fully rolled out? Like, when do you think Verizon comes and says, hey, look, we've got C-band ready to rock. You guys can start using it now?
2 years.
2 years?
2 years. I think 2 years is all Verizon's going to need based off how much money they're spending. Because they're spending $10 billion alone just for the C-band deployment. So I say
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, so I think 2 years is the amount of time that it will take for it to be available in enough places that they're covering, like, let's just say 90-ish% of Americans. Mm-hmm. And then the remaining, like, next 2 years after that will just be filling in the remaining, like, gaps. Similar to how N41 is being deployed right now with T-Mobile, which, on a side note, Austin, I do have T-Mobile as well. They're actually the one I use more. But
oh, that's right. Yeah, you're on the Magenta Max from your OnePlus, right?
Yep, I have AT&T, I have T-Mobile, and then I also have US Mobile using Verizon. But yeah, I think cool. 2 years. 2 years is what it's going to take for C-band to be deployed in a meaningful way that's like usable, and that's just based off the amount of money that Verizon's allocating to it.
Yeah, and I think they talked about that C-band spectrum getting available to be used the first part of 2022. I think they're going to take the T-Mobile approach where the first month of the first day of 2022 comes around, they're going to say, all right, we're lighting up C-band in 2 markets.
Yeah.
And then they're going to make a press release about it. And then over the next year, Dennis, like you said, they'll slowly, quietly start adding, C-band everywhere and cover 90% of Americans. But I definitely think that they're going to really jump the gun once 2022
I
hits.
think Verizon's going to get the panels and stuff like that and already start having them installed, and they're going to flip a switch similar to when they deployed their low band 5G, and it's going to be like, boom, it's in 40 markets or whatever it is, and then it's going to, and the reason why I'm saying it's going to take 2 years though is because they're going to probably run into some problems where there's going to be certain areas where X TV provider or whoever needs to reallocate their spectrum over to a different channel for it to actually be live, and that's going to be the thing that makes it slow.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm curious to see it myself. I'm hoping it's sooner than that.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. My first taste of C-band.
Sneed says there's already 30 markets getting C-band antennas right now.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah, I think
awesome.
I'm optimistic we'll see a bigger rollout initially in early 2022. But yeah, to Dennis's point, I do think it'll take longer to fully build it out and flesh it out across the United States. We had another Patreon question kind of around C-band. What latency and upload can we expect from C-band?
It's tough to say. I would imagine C-band would be very similar to what N41 is today. I don't know.
I agree with
that. I think you're going to probably see anywhere from like the 10 milliseconds to 20 milliseconds, which is what I'm seeing in my market. I mean, certain areas have 40 megahertz, some have 80 megahertz, just depending on which tower is lit up that day. But I've seen as low as 7 milliseconds on the latency side, and I've seen as high as about 30, 35. But that could have been a fluke. I don't really.
And upload.
I don't really go from there.
Are we getting a dedicated channel for C-band? Like I know millimeter wave, for example, it's crushing it on the download, but the upload speed is still basically over LTE, is my understanding, or like it's
uplink.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen 100 meg on N41 upload or Stetson. I mean, that's pretty slamming. It's not obviously what you would get for downlink, but I feel like it's adequate for most people. 100 meg upload.
Uplink is typically handled by your low band frequency. So whatever, that's usually your anchor. So for T-Mobile, that would be, their N71 600 megahertz. That would be.
So what do you think we'd see for a C-band, Dennis?
Well, I'm saying that it's not going to be used for uplink. Like Verizon's. Not
it just straight up, it just won't be used at all. Like they'll just use it for the download.
Yeah, I'm saying like it'll probably be like C-band's used for the download speed, and then Verizon will rely on their 700 megahertz or whatever for their uplink, or band 5 for Verizon. Thank you, Sneed. So yeah, like it's not going to be used at all for the uplink, is what I'm saying.
Sweet.
And my guess is that number will go up. Every month people move off of 4G to 5G. So the capacity as we free up capacity for those low band, like that low band spectrum, you'll get more and more as time goes on.
Yeah. Okay. 2 more questions to round this podcast off. Evan coming in. Which carrier do you think is your favorite overall as of right now? And this could be a MNO or an Mvno, I think.
I mean, obviously, I've talked a lot about T-Mobile. I personally use T-Mobile. I've got so many free lines from them. So, I mean,
it's unreal. It's unreal, Austin. That's what it is.
The situation is, I have so many free lines, and my bill is so cheap for what I pay. I'm on Magenta Max, and it's, I don't know, I think it's like $150 for 8 lines or something, or 9 lines. Anyway, so I'd say T-Mobile is definitely high on my list. But I also love US Mobile. One of the things that really intrigues me is like their super LTE network, which needs to be changed. If you hear this, we need a new name for super LTE network. I love the transparency and the visibility into the apps that they provide to their customers, like in real time, where they're able to pull data. And your discussion with Ahmed Stetson was awesome, because he kind of laid out how they pull the data from Verizon and get all the information. And I don't think they actually advertise that it's on Verizon's network, but the super LTE network is Verizon. But being able to get all that data and just having a really nice clean interface, and having like they have new shared pooled data plans now. They're just doing a lot of really innovative things in the wireless space. So I would say definitely T-Mobile, just because they're just killing it, and then also US Mobile. Those are kind of like my 2 favorite right now.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think US Mobile's probably my favorite right now. I mean, it's a close. I love Mint for their full feature support and their affordability. And actually, Dennis is wearing the Mint
Yeah.
Mobile T-shirt right now, right on cue. But I think, yeah, what I love US Mobile. Their app is so beautiful. Like I really feel like they're different in the MVNO space, where the experience is just so smooth and seamless, and you're getting unprecedented amounts of data as a customer, and their plans have keep coming down in price with, as they're able to offer these new deals and negotiate these things. So I think with what they're building in their tech stack and what they're able to offer to consumers, I just love following that. So they're my favorite right now.
AT&T prepaid too, Stetson, just as like a
Okay.
third possible option. I think their pricing is so competitive, and they have so much capacity that even on AT&T prepaid, you're still getting really good data priority and
All
a good
right.
experience.
My favorite my favorite carrier from an MNO standpoint is probably T-Mobile, just because they offer a well-rounded experience as far as customer service is concerned, minus the hiccup that happened that one time. My favorite MVNO though is probably going to be US Mobile as well. They were literally the easiest, most painless person to give my money to when signing up for. Like they literally made it easy, right? And it was easy to activate the SIM card. Their customer service has been like pretty solid when answering questions, and yeah, it's been good. But if we're talking about which carrier is the best as far as performance, because I know that's probably something to take into consideration, I would say AT&T hands down has the best performance at the moment.
Sure. All right. And final question, what carrier do you use for your personal line?
Well, we already kind of answered it.
We all know this. I personally use Mint. Love Mint. They meet my needs and they're super affordable. Dennis, what are you on?
T-Mobile and T-Mobile Magenta Max and AT&T Unlimited Elite, and then Austin, your Magenta Max, as you said, right?
Well, that's 1 through 8. So I have 8 Magenta Max lines. 5 of them are free. I also have a Red Pocket GSM. It's the Red Pocket AT&T plan. I'm on the, I think it's the $30 10 gig a month plan.
I think I'm on that too. I should really.
It's actually it's really good because I use it for work, because you get free international calling to like 80 countries, and we typically, like in our line of work, we do a lot of testing and stuff like that, and it's really cool to have a way to call those numbers. So for $30 a month, I get unlimited calls, 10 gigs of AT&T. It is capped at 75 megabits. Stetson, I think you highlighted that on your website too with
I
Red
did
Pocket,
that.
but
I'm curious to try that out. Go to an AT&T area in my market as well.
oh, it's definitely capped. It's a hard cap. I mean, the speed test just dies at 75. But then I also have a visible line that I've had for about 2 years, and I run with that. And then I think that's all I've got currently. I probably will be looking at an AT&T postpaid line.
I'm hoping to get one of that too.
I'm trying to get circled in. Like, I know you did a video on circled in, Stetson, a while back, and I check it every once a week or so. But no one is offering AT&T plans.
Yeah,
You've got to get someone who really. So if I can't find something soon, I'll probably just open up a postpaid line and maybe try to start a little family.
That's what I got to do, Austin. I'm with you. If anyone's listening to this, wants to join a AT&T family, I need to review them again, do an AT&T speed test. So drop me a line. Maybe we can sort something out.
Get Los Mobile.
I say I can't get Los Mobile because it's business elite. Like, I need to review consumer plans that people are going to sign up for.
So it's like doing fixed wireless and like VPN, MPLS, like data circuits. He's like, yeah, just get this. It's the best of the best. $500 a month. Defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah, so like Los Mobile is great, and check out Carlos's channel to learn more about that. But yeah, for my audience and what I need, I really need just like the basic consumer plan that everyone else is going to sign up for. Yeah. So I think that's it for the show. Austin, I want to thank you for joining us. It was awesome having you on, learning so much more about voice over LTE, voice over NR. I feel like I've got like a field day of testing ahead of me to try that out and see if I even get that in Colorado. I want to thank everyone who joined into the show live, who's watching the YouTube. I want to thank everyone who's listening to the actual podcast format of this. And yeah, consider supporting us on Patreon if you'd like. The link is in the show notes. Vote on the next video that comes out. And Dennis, any other concluding words? I know you're really good at these.
Yeah, I mean, nothing major. Just looking forward to seeing you guys in the after show here.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I know there are some questions we missed, so if you have them, join the after show and we'll try and address them there. Austin, thank you again. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, and I think that's going to be it. So take care, everyone.
All right, take care.
Peace.
Bye.